Excellent. All right. There we go. So yes, welcome. And today is through Teams. So please note that if you need some accessibility options that are available via Teams, please use those options and do let us know if you're having any issues with those, and hopefully we can help you. So my name is David Everest. I'm the manager of arts funding at Create New South Wales. And to start with, I would also like to acknowledge that we're all living and working on Aboriginal land. I'm actually coming to you from Gumbungia country up on the mid-north coast, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and acknowledge the important role that First Nations artists play in contributing to our culture. I'd also like to introduce the team members who are here on the call today, who will also be helping answering the questions. So we'll start. We've got Nick Pont with the balloon, who's also running the slideshow. Nick, if you could just introduce yourself quickly.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick Pont. I'm in the arts funding team at Create New South Wales. I've been with Create for about 18 months, and I'm also a visual artist working in painting and drawing.
Thanks, Nick. And Ian.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Cifuentes. I'm also one of the members in the arts funding team, one of the lead officers. I have a music background, so I play drums, do a lot of session work, and also, just have a lot of knowledge around the classical music, opera, choral. That's mine.
Thanks, Ian. And Kartika, who unfortunately, Kartika's due to the wonders of modern technology, her computer video isn't working, but Kartika.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name's Kartika. I'm also in the arts funding team, but I also, I've been in the arts funding team for, I think, 4 years now, but I also have a background in the visual arts sector and also as a musician and dancer. So, yeah, back to you, David.
Awesome. Yeah, so look, all the members of our team here have had an arts career or still involved in an arts career. So hopefully, if you do have questions and when you're talking about your projects, we do have an understanding of what's actually involved at in the process of actually creating work, and hopefully we're not too hardened as bureaucrats at this point in our careers, so we can be really helpful. So the next slide, Nick. So this session is around the next steps, which is the professional development funding. And if people have been following us for a while, this program actually replaces the quick response project funding grants that previously existed. But the real focus on this one now is to really focus in on professional development for artists as individuals. And the idea is to really help you develop your career. So it's very much focused on professional development, networking, collaboration, and for all those sort of career opportunities that can really enhance your skills and development. So it's quite different to the other funding like Creative Steps and Cultural Access, which is very much about creating new work and new projects. This one is really about you and your development. Hence, it's the smaller funding, etc. We'll talk about that a bit later. But the focus very much is on you as an individual, your arts practice and your development. So this did come as a response to the Creative Communities policy, which was released last year, and a lot of reforms came out of that, and this is one of the reformed programs that was part of that development. And then next slide. So I'm going to hand over to Ian to just talk you through the details around this one.
Thanks, David. Hi again, everyone. So just a couple of key points around the next steps, professional development. So individuals, as David mentioned, can apply. So applicants must be 18 years or above. Also currently living in New South Wales for a minimum of 12 months. The grant amount, so it starts from $2,000 and the maximum you can apply for is $10,000. And it does involve contributing at least 5% of other cash or in-kind support towards your project, so other sources of income. In terms of when the activity starts and ends, so it needs to start after the 1st of September this year, 2025, and be completed by the 31st of December 2026 next year. You can apply for costs that you need to cover to make sure the project's a success. So things like renting or hiring the spaces for workshops and rehearsals for shows, that's the kind of thing that can be included. Also fees for development opportunities, so things like mentor fees as well, workshop fees, accommodation and travel costs can be included in this as well. And any other kind of costs that relate to your activity in that way. So also costs to do with attending the conference or networking events can be covered too, and costs to support Aboriginal protocols and accessibility. There's also the artist fees elements, so just making sure that that's based on industry standard rates. I'll pass it over to Nick Pont to kind of go over the assessment criteria. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Ian. Hi, everyone. So yeah, with the next steps funding round, the criteria is split into 4 categories. So the first one is idea, and it's weighted at 40% of the scoring. So in that section, we're asking for a vision for your project that clearly summarizes the ideas, its aims and purpose. The question you respond to is, what do you want to do? And we're also providing things you may want to consider. So what is your idea for this project? What do you want to achieve? What is interesting about it? And what will you communicate to other artists, communities, and/or audiences? The second part of the criteria is diversity and participation, which makes up 30%. In this section, you'll demonstrate how your project is relevant to or will benefit you. And the question for this one is, why do you want to do it? You may want to consider the following. Why is the project relevant to you? How will it benefit you and potentially other artists, communities, and/or audiences? How does the project reflect the diversity of people in New South Wales? What are the results you want to see at the completion of your project? And you also have an opportunity to address the strategic priority areas within this section. Strategic priority areas are First Nations stories and communities, regional New South Wales, broad and inclusive communities and content, accessibility and equity, Western Sydney, and next generation of creatives and audiences. And within our glossary, which I'll pop in the chat shortly, there's an extended definition of these priority areas, and I'd certainly recommend having a look at the glossary. There's a bunch of other terms that are really handy to know about. So the third part of the criteria is experience, weighted at 20%. In this section, you list the artistic experience of those involved in the project. So the question will be, who is involved and why are they the right people for this activity? You may want to consider, what experience do you bring to this project? What skills and expertise do the artists, arts and cultural workers or organisations involved have that will ensure your project is a success? How will those involved help build your career and professional skills? And the fourth section of the criteria is sustainability, which is weighted at 10%. and you'll be asked to provide a budget to support your project. The question is, how will the funding be spent? And you may want to consider how your budget reflects efficient use of funds to achieve the project's goals. And you'll also get a chance to provide other sources of funding. So what other sources of funding are there for your project? And that's the criteria for next steps. I'll pass back to you, David.
Great, thanks. So we have really tried to simplify the application process with asking those, two main questions, and then a few other details to fill in. We've also tried to simplify the budget so that there's just a number of categories that you need to fill in as part of the budget now. But of course, there are lots of questions that that this still raises in terms of, I'm sure there will be lots of questions that you still have. And today's session is very much around hopefully answering those questions and opening up a bit of a discussion about this funding round and the sorts of projects that you might be thinking of and how they fit into the program. So just to note that the applications for this are open until the 30th of April at 5 o'clock. And we really recommend that you read the program, the guidelines, which are on the website. Hopefully you've seen them already, but we can also provide links to those. And as Nick talked about, we have a glossary that refers to some of the terms, especially what we mean by some of the terms which have various definitions, and there are other resources there as well. So then to apply, you actually have to apply through Smarty Grants, which is another software program that web-based program that you need to apply through. And we can also help you if you get stuck with any of that. And you can also make a booking with our team through our booking system, so that you can choose a time and a date to speak to one of our team with any questions that you have in relation to the funding program as well. So that's the kind of basic information. And now I'd really like to open it up to the floor for any questions. And obviously there's no question is a wrong question. And if you would like to, you can just put your questions in the chat and we can go through them there. Or if you'd like to turn on your camera and ask us via just through the Teams, that is also fine. So let's open it up and see if there are any questions. Sure, there must be some definitions and things which are... Yes, Kate. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, hi.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting these sessions. So wonderful. I have a question about the definitions of an individual. That's an odd question, but I was trying to understand from the website what's possible for a collective or a group to apply in this particular application. Because I can see that, it's very much focused on opportunities for like residency programs or things like that. So I'm asking because I'm part of a group that's been successfully, offered a residency, which we need to apply for additional funding for. But, yeah, just wanted to get clarification around how it's possible to apply as an individual on behalf of a collective.
Yeah, great question. And this is, yeah, it's a tricky one, because we have decided that this funding should only be for individuals. So with Creative Steps, which is also open at this time, which is for projects, that is open for individuals and groups. So for something like that, you would actually have to apply through Creative Steps. And you'd have to focus it more on the project kind of outcomes of the residency rather than the professional development. And we've kind of done that to kind of simplify this program really, and make it to be really about individuals and your own individual development rather than being up against a group's development, because then it starts to get very it becomes very murky between what is the difference between professional development and a project, which there always is. I mean, that's the reality. There is a kind of a grey area there, because every project is, of course, about your professional development as well. But by doing it this way, so that this one, Next Steps, is purely for individuals, we make it very clear that it's essentially an individual's professional development. But yeah, for a project like that, you would be able to apply in Creative Steps for your group.
Sure. So just to clarify, if you were to apply for in this thing as a professional development opportunity, and you had, if say for example something different, not what I just mentioned, and you had additional people that you wanted to work with, it would be that it's not a group that's working together, but a collection of artists that you'd be employing to come together for your own personal development.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's the other clear way of talking about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
David, sorry. Yeah. There's a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yeah, let's go through those.
Yep. So I've just got a question from Simone. Are there disciplines that are not eligible for professional development? For example, filmmaking, writing, or multimedia?
Yes. So Create New South Wales is the arts funding body for the New South Wales government, and there is also Screen New South Wales, and also now we also have Sound New South Wales. So unfortunately, filmmaking definitely falls within Screen if we're talking about the making of films. There is, of course, a grey area now when we're talking about Screen in terms of how that crosses over with other art forms. So if Screen is just part of what you're doing, but you're involving theatre or visual arts or and digital and experimental, then that does fall within Create New South Wales. But if it's just filmmaking purely for Screen and film, then that isn't eligible. That does fall under Screen New South Wales. But writing and multimedia, that's all fine. We do now have the new we have 10 art form boards that assess applications, and this changed as part of the review as well. And we now have digital, experimental, immersive and light art board, which I would think mainly covers the term multimedia. And we also have Community Arts and Cultural Development Board now, which also covers a lot of kind of art forms that are often integrated. But of course, the focus of that is on community arts and cultural development, which is more related to how you're working with a particular community. I think that answers it. Does anyone else, Nick or Ian, jump in? Do you think I've covered that?
I was just going to say that there's also a list of things you can't apply for within the guidelines, and that link's in the chat.
Cool.
I've also, sorry, Davis, taking here. I've also included the Art Form Board FAQs link there, so you can look at the definitions there as well of each Art Form Board.
Yeah, and it's really advisable to look at those definitions if you're not sure about which art form that you necessarily fit into. I think there's another question. Do you want to read that one too, Kartika?
Yeah, so I just missed a question that was earlier on in the chat from Suzanne. So she's just asking how many of these grants are available.
All right. Look, that's an impossible question for us to answer at this point in time. There's each round will be different depending on the budget that's available at that time. We're about to announce the results of the last funding round, but it's still under embargo, so I can't actually give you the exact number that were that are going to be, or that have been successful in the last round at this point in time, but that will be available on our website once it's no longer under embargo, so you can see what's happened in the last round. That's not necessarily an indication of what will happen in this round, because the budget's changed from round to round and the numbers across the different funding rounds change. But there's, yeah, so I can't really answer it except to say that unless you're in it, unless you have a go, you don't know. So I'd encourage you to have a go.
Great. So I've just got another question here, David, from Lisa, saying, I'm an artist and interested in overseas personal development in the field of arts in health. Would I be eligible to apply under this funding?
Look, arts and health is a slightly tricky one because obviously our focus is on the arts as opposed to health, but depending on what area that you're hoping to develop your skills in, that could well be eligible. But maybe that could be a one where you'd like to chat a little bit further with our team to just be clear about what area you're looking at. Our focus at Create is on the artists and on art, but of course health is closely, aligned with that, and so a lot of artists are working, in that kind of territory. So I guess it's just about making it clear in your application that the key part of what you're the skills that you're developing are related to art and arts development for yourself or for the community that you're working with. So bit of a grey area, as there are a lot of grey areas in all this, but yeah, it's definitely possible, but maybe more discussion would be also be useful. And the next one, Kartika.
Yeah, so for the next question, so in relation to overseas activities as well. So I've got a question here from Jules. So interested in attending a conference overseas to strengthen skills as a creative producer and to be able to collaborate with other organisations overseas and from Australia. Is this the right grant to apply for? Noting the assessment criteria requires ideas.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I think, yeah, the focus being on strengthening your skills and the fact that and collaboration with other organisations, including overseas, is, yeah, I can see how that's a strong idea, and definitely something that our assessment boards would be interested in and would think positively about. Obviously, there's a lot of details there that you also need to explain, but that sounds great.
Okay, so the next question here, we've got a question from Yandra. I'm a composer, theatre filmmaker wanting to get into virtual reality. Is it possible to get funding towards this?
Oh, tricky question. Virtual reality is a tricky one because it, I guess the whole virtual reality sector has very much grown out of screen. So it is very much part of the Screen New South Wales world. But having said that, depending on how you're looking at, I guess, using that and integrating it with your other art form skills, it could be something that could cross over, certainly as a composer and as a theatre maker. So yeah, again, a tricky one, and you would need to be very clear about how it was related to, the skills in those other art forms as opposed to just screen making skills that would then fall much more within the Screen New South Wales kind of area. But it would quite possibly fall within the Digital Experimental Immersive Light Art Board that kind of looks, which is the board that really looks at, I guess, the new technologies and the crossover between multiple art forms in relation to how new technologies are being used. But also one that you might want to discuss with our team in a little bit more detail to make sure that you're really aligning it in the right way.
Okay, so next question I can see in the chat box is from Claire. So hi, I'm looking to apply for funding for an unpaid internship program based in regional New South Wales. Should my budget include my fees? And if so, can my over 5% in-kind support be some proportion of my fees? My costs to myself will be primarily accommodation and transport.
Another great tricky question for me. So the art form boards are very strong and keen to pay artists properly, and I think that needs to be an important part of your proposal, that you are paid for doing the internship. So I think that would be important because I don't think we want to see artists not being paid for what they do. In terms of in-kind support, again, we don't really like seeing in-kind support being a way of reducing your fees. We more refer to in-kind support as being around potentially things like accommodation, if that is being supplied as a cost that otherwise that you would have had to have paid for, but because it's again, I not exactly, would probably need to know a little bit more about the details of how that works. But yeah, in kind is really referring to things like, yeah, the in kind use of space, maybe the in kind use of materials, things like that, rather than artist fees.
Okay, so in the chat box, we've got another comment from Yantra. So I'm working on a project that involves choir, film, and live performance. I'm looking to get a producer and director involved. Is it still a work in it is still a work in progress, but I'm planning to show it at Sydney Festival.
Cool. Well, that to me though is sounding more like a new work. So it's sounding a little bit more like a Creative Steps or Cultural Access project, as opposed to this Next Steps, which is really a focus on, yeah, artists' professional development around, you know, particular skills and working with particular people rather than around a project. So again, it might be good to talk to one of our team about it, but yeah, it's sounding like that might be more a Creative Steps or Cultural Access project.
Okay, so we've got a question here from Lisa. Could you include a budget for a videographer to film the project? I run creative community projects and would like to capture the participants and the project on video.
Yes, again, this is sounding a little bit more like a Creative Steps or Cultural Access project rather than a professional development project. But in terms of, you know, getting stuff on video, of course, again, it's about making the argument about why this is important for the project and the value of it for the project. So that is an important consideration, because of course we'd all love to get our projects videographed, but I think it can be quite expensive, and the purpose of it needs to be, you know, quite clearly articulated in terms of the benefits of doing that, as opposed to just a nice to have, if that makes sense. But again, yeah, I'd suggest you talk to the team, because that's, to me, is sounding more like a Creative Steps or Cultural Access project than a Next Steps project.
Okay, so I think I saw Gina had her hand up.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, feel free to
Thanks.
unmute.
Gina.
Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to work that out.
We can hear you.
Am I on? Hi.
Yes.
Hi. So I'm brand new to the whole applying for grants thing. So this is like just a preliminary kind of joining in. So I don't know if I'll apply for this round, but I just want to understand something I'm a little bit confused about is, on the one hand, you've said it's a professional development for individual artists, and then on the other hand, a lot of your criteria or assessment criteria seems to be around an idea or project. So I'm a little bit confused, like in the sense that I can understand if the project is to develop yourself personally. Yeah, you're nodding. Okay, so I just have a couple of questions, and I'm sorry if they're kind of beginner level, but can you apply for this grant or grants to actually pay for courses? Yes.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
even
yeah.
like bachelor level. Do you know what I mean? Like if I want to segue into university art training from TAFE, do grants cover that? No.
No. So
okay.
yeah, so just to be clear about that, we talk about courses, but not university or TAFE courses. It's more, you know, one-off kind of skills development courses or classes or workshops rather than, yeah.
So
And
rather
yeah,
than the
and just
whole
to,
course, yeah.
yeah, and just, yeah, look, your question around projects and professional development is a very good one. And we do really mean the project is your professional development.
Okay,
We've
now I
kind of
understand.
used the same language as the project funding as a kind of a simplification thing, but yeah, that's very
Okay.
much about that. Yeah.
Am I allowed to ask another question?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, because these are good
okay.
questions. Yeah.
So I have a couple more, if that's okay with everyone. So, so can I give you an example? So say, for example, I live in the mountains. So there is a lot of art. There's a strong art culture here. But some of the courses are quite expensive, and I have a permanent disability. So I want to know how, like, for example, say I wanted to organize for, say, nude drawing, but there isn't anything available here, and I would have to travel into Sydney, but I can't because of a disability. So I would want to, say, organise like some models and photographer to do some poses, to create a kind of environment where I can practice that. Is that something that's reasonable, or is that just too ridiculous? Like, I'm just giving an example.
Yeah, no,
you know,
it's good.
like where there are gaps in availability in where I live due to disability. And if that, and I might need disability support, you know, so like a mental support or physical support. Like, sorry, I hope that's okay.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, it's a really good tricky question. To actually, you know, set up a whole process like that. These grants are only for $10,000 as a maximum. So to probably set up a whole
oh, so that's too big, is it? Okay.
it's maybe it just is starting to sound a little bit too big, but and it could be more something that you did do as, you know, cultural access in terms of developing a project that involved, you know, sort of a drawing and so forth, and then you could kind of employ, as part of the project, you know, you could employ people to work on that. Certainly as part of our budget now, we have a line item around accessibility, and you know, that's certainly where you can put in, you know, additional costs for, you know, support workers or so forth to help in making the project accessible to you and to others. So yeah, we do certainly see that as an important part of a budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you've pretty much answered. I guess the only other thing would be, do the grants have to use up the whole 10 grand? Like, what if you only need, okay. So you can do little things that you might need, like that are only like $500 or $1,000 or something.
2,000 is the minimum.
Oh, 2,000. Okay, sure.
Yeah. So just because we thought that, yeah, it needs to be a fairly substantial kind of project.
Okay, great.
To make it.
Thank you very much. Okay.
No worries, great. Thanks for your questions.
Thanks.
Okay, so we've got a question here from Deborah White. Hello, I may have missed this in the feedback. How soon after applications close do you announce approval, acceptance of the grant being awarded? Wanting to understand timelines and deadlines. Yeah,
look, we don't have a definite timeline on that, because it's quite we are a bureaucracy when it comes to that, and things take different times, different times of the year, etc. Various things happen, but the project start date is kind of our main guideline, I guess, so that and the end date again, is kind of notional. And actually, if the project does extend beyond the end date, you can get a variation to the project and just extend it. And usually that's quite easy to do if there's a good reason for why the project needs to be extended beyond the dates that you originally put in. Does that answer the question? Cool.
Yes, thank you, David.
Cool. And quite often we will notify you and if you're successful or not successful under embargo, which means that it hasn't gone out into the public yet, but we let you know that you've got or haven't been successful so that you can get on with the project.
Thank you.
Okay, so next question here, got a question from Ali. I'm a performing and visual artist. I'm an established theatre maker and emerging visual artist, trying to work out the best new marketing strategy, the best way to sell my shows and products and approach different organisations. I'm looking to engage a marketing expert to help me with branding and marketing. I would also like to attend APAM for the first time in Perth to start to sell my latest show. Would that sit well within next steps?
Yeah, okay. Marketing is a bit of a tricky one in terms of next steps, but certainly APAM fits very clearly into it. I'll go with APAM first. With APAM, obviously you need to put a strong case why this is important for you at this point in time, and then I guess what you're going to get out of it and the outcomes for you in terms of your career and so forth. So yeah, because there's quite likely be quite a few people that apply for that, and so you will have to have a very competitive application as to why you at this point in time, etc., it's going to be really valuable too. In terms of marketing is a little bit tricky within this, because as sort of talked about before, this is a real focus on artists and your art skills, not so much your marketing skills. That kind of comes in. I know it's connected and it's kind of part of the important you need to do as part of being an artist, but in a very kind of competitive environment, I guess you would be competing against artists who are really looking to develop their art skills in terms of their process and their those sorts of skills. So it's a little bit of a tricky one, even though it's a bit of a grey area, to say that to engage a marketing expert, particularly if that was the main part of your proposal. I think potentially it would be stronger if it was maybe a part of the proposal, but to make it the main part of it, I think would be quite tricky. Nick, do you want to jump in on that? Help me out.
I think you explained it quite well, to be honest.
Okay, it's again, it's a tricky one, and there is a lot of kind of nuance to this, so you might want to have a chat to one of the team about that in more detail. Next one.
Okay, so I've got a question from Jessica. Is the funding reliant on a successful visual arts outcome, or can the project have a reasonably large research focus?
Definitely for next steps, it can be about research, but it, again, not to kind of distinguish from creative steps, which is the development of a new work, or cultural access, development of new work. So those grant rounds might be more suitable to something like that if you're talking about the development of work. If you're talking about research for yourself in terms of your own skills and your own development, perhaps that's the next steps, but it's sounding a bit more like you're doing research for the development of a new work, which fits within new work. But yeah, you may want to clarify a bit more on that.
Okay, so next question from Marina. You mentioned writers are included. Does it matter if it's screenwriting, or is anything screen related excluded if it is not crossing over other art forms?
Yeah, unfortunately, screenwriting, if it's not crossing over, is the world of Screen New South Wales. But yeah, obviously writing for theatre, writing in other contexts within other art forms falls within Create New South Wales. But yeah, writing for screen is would not be eligible.
I've got a question here from Suzanne. Is this professional development grant also suitable for professional working musicians, or more for musicians writing and or performing original works, or perhaps both?
All right, well, this is slightly tricky one too, because we now have Sound New South Wales, but within Create New South Wales, we have the classical music board, an opera board. So if we're talking about that part of the sector, then yes, certainly suitable for working musicians. So again, it might be worth looking at the definitions and clarifying that in relation to Sound New South Wales, which their definition is, their focus is really on contemporary music, which is, you know, music written and being written and performed now. Definitely have a look at whether you're crossing into that territory. But if you're yeah, more in the classical music, or also in the, you know, the music for sound and screen and sound and experimental, that can fall in the digital and experimental art form board. So sound is a little bit of a tricky one, and definitely worth talking to our team just to clarify those elements.
Okay, so I'm just going back. Apologies, I missed your question, Neela. If the project includes attending a congress, what types of support documents or confirmation documents can be provided to strengthen the application? Congress can be attended upon a purchase of tickets. And then the second question is, does the visual arts panel consider design as an eligible discipline?
Oh, so yeah, look, it's really good to get some sort of evidence of confirmation, particularly if you've been invited somewhere, or as part of your professional development, you've been invited to a conference or something. A letter of confirmation or documentation of confirmation will definitely strengthen the application. It's not totally required, because obviously there are some instances where that might not be there, but it would be probably more competitive if you do have that confirmation. Just also noting now that we don't ask for letters of support. As part of the review, it was found that people obtaining letters of support was extremely time consuming, and was not only for the person getting them, but also the people writing them. And often, you know, we knew in the world that people wrote them for people and then just got them to sign them. So they weren't actually that valuable anyway. So now we really just do focus on letters of confirmation or that sort of thing. Now, the second part of that question, what was the second part of that question? Sorry.
Does the visual arts panel consider design as an eligible discipline?
Look, a bit of a grey area there. Design as a thing in itself, not so much. It really is focused on, I guess, your career as a visual artist. Obviously, there's a lot of grey areas there, but I think in terms of the being competitive in the visual arts board, for the visual arts board, the focus is more on the, I guess, what we would call the traditional visual artist, rather than the design as such at this point. But there is quite a grey area there. And I guess if you kind of in both areas, as a lot of visual artists are, I would focus more on the visual arts side rather than the design side. But yeah, that there is a grey area there.
Okay, we've got a question here from Kate. Will there be a round 3 in 2025?
There will be another round in 2025. Yeah, it will be. Yeah, hopefully we'll announce when that will be fairly soon. But yeah, there will definitely be another round.
Got a question from Jessica. Does socially engaged art fit into this grant? The work would have a community focus, but would also be about developing my skills as a socially engaged artist and how that can benefit the community.
Yeah, great question. And with the reintroduction of the Community Arts and Cultural Development Board, there's been a lot of discussion around that, and where socially engaged art and artists fit in to this world. Certainly the definition of community arts and cultural development is pretty broad, and in many cases would cover socially engaged artists, but it does come down very much because obviously there are socially engaged artists work in different ways across the spectrum. So it would be important to look at the definition in the glossary that covers community arts and cultural development, and be clear that your work and the work that you're doing does fall within that definition. Or otherwise, of course, you know, you might prefer to see your work within the visual arts board. So which, you know, has slightly different focus, but certainly can also fall within that board. So that can be quite a tricky, you know, question and discussion. But I think just focusing on the definitions and which one, I guess, you feel most strongly aligned to. Right.
Okay, I think we've covered all the questions here in the chat box.
Brilliant. We've got 3 minutes to go. Look, fantastic questions. I hope that's useful for everyone. And yeah, look, as we've said, we, through that booking link, we're very happy to talk further to you about it, especially some of those tricky ones, which, you know, been some really great questions that have been brought up as part of this. And yeah, we're really open to discussing, you know, them with you and hopefully teasing out some of those questions, particularly when there are, you know, things that cross over. But, you know, as we say, you know, arts funding, it's not a science. It's quite a complex thing. We try and make it easier for people to apply and so forth, but there are still many questions and many complex parts to it. Any quick final questions that people are burning to ask before we? Great. No. Kate, yes, Kate. You're on mute again.
Myself again. Sorry, I thought I'd just jump in with this last minute. I'm going to join in the chat on Wednesday to talk about the cultural access round, and but I can't make it tomorrow for the other one. So I just thought I'd quickly check in about the difference between those two, because I guess what I'm challenged by a little bit is going, if I'm working with artists who identify as having a disability in a mixed ability ensemble, but our project is in essence, you know, just a kind of an arts project that happens to have artists in it that have disabilities. Would we be better to kind of be focusing on the cultural access, or would it be better to be focusing on kind of promoting it as an arts project in and of itself that just happens to have, yeah, artists with different needs?
Yeah, look, it's can be a tough call. The key thing for cultural access is the kind of leadership and ownership of the project. So is the leadership and ownership by of the project kind of in control of artists from those priority area groups? So, because I guess the aim of cultural access is really to support those priority areas to develop work and to develop careers, and to in a sense not be competing against you know, people
Everyone
not
else.
from those, everyone. Yeah. So I think if that is the focus of what you're doing, then I think that's probably where you should aim for, but hopefully we can clarify that a bit more on the session on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just was curious whether I should try to find a way to come tomorrow, or I've booked it a one-to-one session so I can chat more about it in person, but I just was, curious to understand the kind of, the reason why. And so that makes a lot more sense now to understand that it's kind of a pool to enable people who maybe would have their own access issues to applying to be in a pool that is less competitive somehow. Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah. Although not less competitive, but yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, I know exactly. That's what I meant. But yes, good to clarify.
Yeah. No, good question. All right, brilliant. Thanks everybody, and thanks for those great questions, and hopefully that has clarified for things for some people. And if it hasn't, you better book an appointment with us, and hopefully we can sort it out that way. And yeah, we're dropping those things in the chat line for the funding opportunities calendar, etc. And thanks everybody, and all the best with it. Cheers.